trusted source of all things newsworthy across Britain, or at least we believed it was. But then came the harsh realities, the investigations and the exposés. The irony is, Panorama used to be one of my favourite shows, exposing corruption, political bias and all sorts of underhand goings on. But who would have ever dreamt that the BBC could star on their own show? So, if we get to the basics and the rules that apply to the BBC, they are legally bound by Section 319 of the Communications Act 2003 to report the news with due accuracy. That doesn't mean they've got to get it 100% correct every single time, but what it means is they have to do their due diligence and be as accurate as they possibly can be, so as not to be feeding the public fake news and propaganda. But the thing is, when you dig into the BBC's past, you don't find integrity. You find a pattern of deception that spans decades. In 2011, Panorama was caught using fabricated evidence in a Primark sweatshop expose. I remember the story, and when the truth came out, the BBC Trust admitted that there was a serious breach. It was found that the footage of 3 boys in an Indian workshop was actually staged by a freelance journalist, set up to gain ratings with the shock factor, but broadcast as an expose of Primark factories' poor working conditions and suffering. The question is, did the BBC know this before they published it? Or was it simply a massive lack of due diligence and failing to do adequate checks before they actually released it? But let's face it, the Primark case is just the tip of the iceberg. If we go back a bit further, we have the interview of the century that shocked the whole entire world. And the best of it, the Dyson report proved that the BBC secured its 1995 interview with the Princess Diana by duping her into revealing private information, and doing so through pure fraud. The journalist in question used forged bank statements to manipulate her into giving an interview. They were so desperate to probe into the private lives of the monarchy that they fabricated evidence to do so. But the inquiry didn't just expose a rogue reporter, it also exposed a 20-year cover-up that followed it. The BBC simply cannot expect to hide behind the Royal Charter and keep getting public funding when they keep on repeating the same errors of judgment over and over again. How can the government even contemplate extending the Royal Charter and making it permanent? Yes, the BBC are requesting it, but they would, wouldn't they? Let's face it, this is a broadcasting corporation, backed by the state, funded with public money. So to all intents and purposes, it's a job for life if you work for them, and they do get paid fairly well. But more fundamentally, as it is a royal charter, does His Majesty King Charles feel the BBC is upstanding enough to be backed by Royal Charter and publicly funded after all the scandals they've been involved in? Okay, the government governs under the instruction authorised by the monarch, but really, the BBC, after being involved in a scandal involving Princess Diana, his then wife, and the mother of one of the future kings of England, the BBC should have had their royal charter revoked way back then. And I'm not even going to start on Jimmy Savile. Yes, the guy managed to successfully con, lie and cheat many people, not to mention all the damage and harm he did during his lifetime. But we know the stories that have come out, and we also know that the bulk of his life was entirely funded by the BBC. And he successfully managed to use BBC premises as his playground for most of his career. Now don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments on the BBC Royal Charter renewal, the TV licence and the BBC itself. And for those of you who think the BBC have changed, turned over a new leaf, learned their lesson, and that new leadership will solve the problems, all we have to do is look at the catastrophe of November last year, 2025, with the President Trump edit scandal. So yes, Panorama and the BBC did it again. Panorama was found to have spliced 2 separate segments of Donald Trump's speech, spoken 50 minutes apart, into one shot to create a false narrative. Now that is shocking. Again, probably done to try and boost the ratings with a scoop that nobody else has got for a show and TV broadcasting network that's failing miserably. And of course, nobody else did have that footage because it wasn't real. Following that, there was the leak of the Prescott memo, which exposed systemic bias within the BBC. Let's face it, when the leadership is built on lies, the BBC is no longer a part of our democracy. It becomes a facade, a public forum for glory seekers, manipulation, coercion, and influencing of the public. And while you are forced to pay £180 a year, those of you that pay it, the National Audit Office has documented a trail of financial incompetence at the BBC. Just look at the DMI fiasco. £98.4 million of public money wasted on a digital archiving project that was scrapped for being unworkable. Then there's the BBC Severance package scandal. The Public Accounts Committee slammed the BBC for its culture of golden parachute goodbyes, with over £60 million of public-funded money being paid out in executive severance awards, those awards far exceeding contracted expectations on many occasions. So while many of the public are struggling to get by with the cost of living crisis, the BBC are paying severance packages over and above what they're legally obliged to. That must be for the many years of good service that all the staff put in. And then there's the final myth, the political independence. Under Section 365 of the Communications Act 2003, a licence fee is technically a tax. It's a tax on airwaves, radio waves. Although analogue receivers are a thing of the past anyway, to be fair, digital receivers are. Everything's done by Wi-Fi or data now, so surely it should be a data tax. Either way, that money, those licence fees, flow straight into the consolidated fund. That's the government's smelting pot. Then a portion of it's handed back to the BBC, with a managing board filled with political appointees. So there we have it, the BBC, a state-funded, Crown-authorised monopoly that competes with an unfair advantage with commercial rivals and still has to charge more money and frequently doesn't meet expectations, using public money to manipulate the news as they see fit and sweep scandals under the rug until official inquiries are launched or they're forced to make public apologies. And while we're on the point of public apologies, yes, they did apologise to Donald Trump. However, if the Florida court upholds his claim, it's true, they don't have any jurisdiction in the UK, but all they'd have to do then is take a case against the BBC through the English courts for non-payment of a debt. So the way that could unfold is if Donald Trump decides to pursue it in that manner and it ends up being brought through the English courts and he succeeds, obviously any compensation award that the BBC has to pay is going to come out of public funding. So anyone that pays for the licence is basically going to be putting money in Donald Trump's pocket. On the topic of money, now that Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC, is gone, they finally appointed somebody else. In his place, they put a former Google chief, Matt Britton. His salary again is likely to be in the region of £500,000 a year, possibly with bonuses and expenses on top. If a new Director General of the BBC is a digital media titan, that's just what they need to survive in a digital age. So, if the BBC is as world-class and important as the government make out, and with the new Google media mogul in charge, it should no longer need a mandatory TV licence fee for funding or the shield of the Royal Charter. With Matt Britton in charge, surely the BBC can now compete on the open market with the likes of Netflix, Now TV, Disney+, Amazon Prime, Paramount, MGM, and all the other networks and studios, and finally stand on their own 2 feet. Because surely in a modern society, if your TV network's any good or your streaming service, you will get subscribers, you will get views, and you will get ratings. If not, you won't. So all the BBC need to do is put in the work and roll the dice, just like any other network and streaming service has to. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Should the BBC stay or should it go? In the meantime, stay safe, stay legal, but more importantly, stay informed. Until next time.